Good evening. We'll call to order the Public Safety, Health, and Welfare Committee meeting of Tuesday, August 24th, beginning at 6:46 p.m. Present are all of council, including committee members Brossard, Williamson, and Limpert, Council President Jones, Mayor Kennedy, I believe I saw Director Kopfer, and guests. We're here this evening to discuss Ordinance 2021-51, which authorizes the mayor to purchase one ambulance rescue squad for the North Olmsted Fire Department through the state purchase program from Horton Emergency Vehicles for a price of $353,431, and further authorizing the mayor to execute all documents and declaring an emergency. Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. This is a new purchase from Horton. The new squad will replace a 2012 unit stationed at Station 1. The new squad falls in line with our 5-year replacement plan and gives us 4 frontline units. Each station will have 2 frontline units. The unit will be equipped with full advanced life support equipment. The chassis will be a Freightliner medium duty as specified by our fleet personnel. And again, you said the cost was $353,000, and we're purchasing from Horton off the state bid. And this squad was discussed in budget also.
Okay, thank you. This was budgeted for, so at this time, I don't have any additional follow-up questions or comments. Are there any from committee?
No.
Any from council? Okay, seeing none, hearing none, at this time, I'll make a motion to approve to all of council Ordinance 2021-51 and ask for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Williamson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That'll pass 3-0. Before we conclude tonight's public safety meeting, though, I have a non-agenda item that I wanted to express a concern about, but we will not open it up for additional comment and/or discussion. Although the mayor's 5K race is indeed a noble cause for sure, I want to express a concern regarding the decision to close down both Elm Road and Oak Lane excuse me, for the duration of the race. This is not just my concern, but there have been concerns expressed by residents who live on or nearby. It appears as though the race route requires runners to use both streets twice, which means it will be closed until the very last runner passes through twice. This is prime soccer and football season, and I just hope that no kids are prevented from making their practices and/or games because of the street closures. Thank you, and our Public Safety Committee meeting will conclude at 6:49 p.m.
I'm good. Okay, this is the Finance Committee of Council, 8/24/21. It's 7 o'clock. The committee consists of Schuman, Broussard, and Kelly, all present. All of council is here. The mayor, the law director, planning and development director, and the finance director, and the law director are all here. We're going to start with 2021-49. Director Copper,
Yes,
have there been any amendments since this one was published?
I'm shocked to say, no, there's been no amendments.
I see there's a lot of changes on here, but it looks like a lot of these are benefits.
Yeah, I can take you through fairly quickly.
Okay.
There's three things that you'll see a lot of that are the same reasoning. The hospitalization expense, which is where we charge the employer share of healthcare for the employees. It was estimated in November, and the temporary, it was revised after January's people had selected and they, where it was getting charged to. But we have had a lot of retirements, a lot of new hires, people switched a lot of plans. They've been adding families. It's just been kind of a crazy year. So it was not right. So we wanted to adjust it to where we think it's going to be. But we've just added, and we added 6 more officers just because police was right in the process of adding those. So I'm hopeful that this is the last we'll have to do that. But sometimes it's just like this. And it was the vacation buyout, the ordinance, the non-bargaining, and the union, AFSCME, I think, they were allowed to buy their vacation buyback this year. It was kind of to make up for furloughs that they took. And also they couldn't use their vacation time up and they were going to lose, some people were going to lose it because of COVID. We allowed that. I think that was passed by council and then the union contract. And some division heads didn't budget for it even though we talked about it. Some people said, oh, my people don't do it, but then they ended up doing it this year. So it's just adjusting it to what we think, what has happened and what more we think we need. And then the boot and tool, that amount changed in the new union contract and it wasn't caught in the final budget. So they're off a little bit there for AFSCME and the at-will non-bargaining units. Then the other are just specific issues, like for example, we had to increase the wages and benefits for the auxiliary officers attending. The other one is the same issue. Increase for leases and telephone service in contractual services for Mayor's Court. I think because they added lines over to the other side so that they could have 4 windows operating during Mayor's Court. There were some like wiring and cabling issues. And then on the second page of the narrative, police has increased for overtime. I know that you're aware that there's been a lot of turnover and a lot of issues with staffing there while they're waiting for the tests to come due and all that. And it takes quite a while to approve people through the process. So they said that they are going to be over in overtime. This is hopefully what they already are in overtime and what they will be in overtime. Like I said, we've got 6 new people, but some of them are lateral transfers, so they might be able to get out on the street alone quicker on shift than others. So we'll have to pay attention to that line. Dispatch, the increase in salaries, we found that the budget posted for part-time salary was $7,800 rather than $78,000, so that was way off in salaries to begin with. Plus, they are adding part-time to take on the Fairview. Additionally, they increased the dollars in benefits and contractual services and capital outlay for the startup costs for the increase in adding dispatch. And there's a corresponding increase in revenue that's taking care of those lines. Then, let's see. Then in Parks and Recreation, on the third last page, they had to move monies to refunds from capital outlay. They increased for pool equipment. They also had an increase in gymnastics outside services, which is a good thing because there's a corresponding revenue associated with that as well, so it's covered there. And then they had to increase $8,000 for additional refunds. That's when the classes had to be canceled, and there were a lot last year, and we suspected there might be some that continued to have to be canceled. So those refunds are increased over and above what they estimated. And the Springvale, the only thing different than the benefit issue and vacation and uniform boot and tool is the increased for refunds there. And then the last page is the sewer revenue fund. There's a $360,000 increase for the South Interceptor Equalization Tank Project, the design engineering for that, and that includes a small amount that's in the contract for like dollar for dollar reimbursements for like printing and things like that. And that's it.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Any questions from committee? Any questions from council? Yes, sir, Mr. Glassman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, it sounded like a relatively innocuous set of changes, but the total is over $1 million. How much of this, Director, are items where we're transferring in special revenue accounts, and this is just more or less a formality, and how much of this is actually new spending?
Let me see, the general fund is $556,000 of it, and part of that is dispatch revenue. And I'm sorry, I did forget to mention that I've also increased the municipal income tax estimated resources and decreased the interest income estimated resources because we're not going to hit that number. So, so that is covered in the general fund with increases in estimated resources. But we really don't have choices in the healthcare and the union contractual things. So those are items that are unexpected, sometimes expected in a year like this because we've had a lot of healthcare issues. So, but we'll manage through it.
So can you tell us what that estimated increase in income tax was?
It was $500,000, which I have to double check. I think that was in total, so like 300 would go, so 70% would go to the general fund and then 15 and 15. But I can get that for you for sure.
This EQ Basin Engineering wasn't already budgeted?
You know what, the design engineer was not because they were still like deciding where and what, so they really didn't know what it would be. But it is in the, it was in the 5-year plan and it's been discussed. It's just part of the process. So, and that was in the rate study albeit it was, 2.5 million instead of 4 million, but it is what it is.
Okay.
So, but we can manage that through our rates, which is in the fund balance.
Any further questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I guess I'm trying to get at the actual specific new number on the spending. I understand the 360 on the EQ base, and I understand the police overtime and the gymnastics. But there still seems to be, I don't know, $500,000 of new money of the hospitalization various items, if I'm looking at this correctly.
Well, I guess, if you
Plus
wanted to.
the 70,000 or so from the Fairview Park contract, decimal point missing. Yeah, is there a correct number with that? We've done a lot of budget corrections on this throughout the year, so it just,
Actually, I think this is one of the first transfer ordinances of the year, but the budget was later this year, so.
right.
But yeah, I can get an exact number for you, but, if you go through in the general fund, the auxiliary officers attending the meetings, that wasn't in the budget, so that's additional spending.
Right.
But we've done this before, it just was, it was remote, and so we have to add that. It's part of the cost of doing business. All the other items are changes, at least for telephone services, maybe. Hospitalization, overtime is 44,000 more in police. 500 in corrections. But other than that, it is all healthcare and benefits that are part of the agreement with employment, so whether it's at-will employees in the non-bargaining ordinance or the union contracts.
Mr. Chair, I understand we need to maintain our collective bargaining agreements. I guess I don't understand how we have such a large change if these are in fact collective bargaining agreements. These are predictable things.
As I stated in the beginning regarding healthcare, those are by far the largest changes.
Right.
And those are just, we have had a lot of changes of personnel, retirements, new hires. Maybe they weren't on the plan and the new hire then ended up having a family plan. So it's based on what we had at the time, at that point in time, and it's calculated out, but it changes. So, and it's changed dramatically this year.
Mr. Chair, if I can ask
Go
one more.
ahead.
Thank you, sir. So, Director, do you feel like we've crested in this, or is there still outstanding volatility, if you will?
I think we've corrected those large glaring errors of the healthcare. They're not really errors, they're changes in estimates based on the personnel that we have and the healthcare that they've chosen.
Yeah,
So-
I said crested, not corrected. In terms of have we reached?
Yeah, no, I know, I used the word, and it's not really an error, it's just a change in estimate. But I think it is, and like I said, I added, because we were down a lot of police officers, like right at the end of August, or end of July, when we were calculating it, I added 6 officers into police for healthcare to hopefully that will, and family plan, so that hopefully that is probably the biggest area where I'm unsure. Because most people, once they're here, they keep the same healthcare once the beginning of the year, where they can make choices unless there's a life change, like they get married or they have a baby or as such, or a divorce.
Thank
Any
you,
more
Mr. Chair.
questions? All right, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we recommend
With suspension, sir?
with suspension. You're asking for suspension?
Absolutely.
Nobody telling me anything. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we recommend, this is 2021-49 with suspension. Ask for a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
3-0.
And Mr. Chair, I'll send it to all the council, the revenue changes, so that,
That'd be good. Thank you,
Sorry.
appreciate that. Okay, now we're going to talk about 2021-50. This is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to make a limited duration interim appointment from the current staffing complement to vacancies in the position of Director of Public Safety and Director of Public Service and declaring an emergency. I understand that this is the law director's initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. So I think by now, most of you are aware that this is not an ordinance that originates from the mayor. It's an ordinance that originates from me, introduced by the mayor. I bring this to you because, as I've discussed in the past, there are a number of issues that have arisen of late that are significant and that I believe it necessitates the position of Director of Public Safety being filled. I come to you with this ordinance because I think it's necessary for us to proceed in some fashion on this question. So I understand that it may not be the optimal solution for this situation. However, it's a solution that is available to all of us to get us through some challenges that we have coming up that do require somebody to be in that capacity. As you know, we have another 4 months until the position of Director of Public Safety and Director of Public Service is by law vacated. Whoever is in the position of mayor as of January 1 will fill that cabinet with whoever they so choose. Nobody holds over, everybody starts fresh or starts anew. So I know that in the past we've had a couple of at least one nomination that did not find favor with council, as council's duty is to do, to see if that person is qualified or they believe that person is the best fit, and they certainly exercise their discretion as they should. Prior to that, we had a nomination on service, and there were some concerns or questions or issues or what have you, and that position was not filled. But what I really do request of you that we, rather than look in that past part of it, that we look at where we are now and what we can do to try to solve this particular situation. We've gone through this originally back in as I wrote in the ordinance back in 1997. There was an interim director, legal opinion written interim director ordinance passed. It was vetoed by then outgoing Mayor Boyle. The veto was overridden by the council that came in January of 1998. And that ordinance remained in place for a period of time. It was way broader than what we have now. I mean, people could stay in the office for up to a year. It was quite a bit broader than this. And so this by no means is an attempt to replicate what went on in the past. That ordinance was eventually repealed, and here we are. So the concept, as you see from this, and for the benefit of those who might be listening, is that the mayor would be able to choose without further hearings and what have you, given the relative brevity of this period of appointment, an interim director. Interim director could serve for no later than December 31st of 2021. That person, because it's created by ordinance, will be chosen from the complement of current staffing. It's not an outside person. It's somebody that works here for the city. Obviously, it's not going to be the mayor. The mayor can't appoint himself. I've made that clear. The charter specifically says he shall hold no other office or appointment or employment with the city of North Olmsted. That is a settled matter. It will not be the mayor. If anyone believes that it might be, it will not. So I won't let that happen because it can't happen. So it's not going to be the case. Should this be approved, that person would be nominated by the mayor and sworn in to fulfill those responsibilities under our code. Some of them which are upcoming are quite significant. So that person would be able to retain their current position with the city. It would not disqualify them from that capacity. It needs to be a position that is consistent. One, I don't believe, could select a candidate from the bargaining unit to serve as a candidate for a safety director, but it certainly gives the mayor some discretion to find somebody within the staffing that would be a quality candidate for that position for the limited duration period of time. We also think that if someone's going to be called upon to do that, that we suggested that they be paid for it. I don't know that it's appropriate to ask anyone to do an additional job and ask that they not be paid. And so we included a compensation amount in here, which is an amount that would be expected for the balance of the term. Somebody can't be appointed for a day and paid $10,000 and then they quit the next day. It's expected that that compensation would be commensurate with the term that they serve. So if it's for the balance of the term, that's how they'll be paid. If they should resign or quit or leave or decide they want to do it, then it would be adjusted accordingly, of course. I come to you with this ordinance. I hope that it finds favor with you. It is, I hope, a temporary solution. I said it's not perhaps the solution that everybody would want, but I think it's one that I hope would be acceptable to the members of council and the administration, and that we could move forward on this question so that I can work with the administration to ensure that those matters that are of significant importance do get addressed, and they get addressed by somebody with the authority as the Director of Public Safety. So I bring this to you. I'm here for questions. I would ask that you folks give consideration to suspension. 3 readings in 30 days will cause some significant issues. However, it's your discretion. If you don't find the ordinance is sufficient, then I guess we'll have to deal with some of those questions that are available in a way that I possibly can. I'm not sure what I'll do, but I'll figure something out, I suppose. So I'm not saying it's on you, but this is something I need, and I think the administration needs, and I think the underlying questions that have to be resolved and the issues that have to be dealt with are those that are in the best interest of the city of North Olmsted as a residents. So here I am. So I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's start with the committee. Mr. Broussard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael, is there a provision in there that addresses workload? So let's just talk hypothetically. The mayor nominates employee A and their workload is such. Does he or she have the ability to offload that workload to another employee while they're focusing on their new duties?
I would think that the individual selected for this position is going to have the resources and staffing of the administration to assist in ensuring that those duties get performed, even if it's the original responsibilities. And we're going to have to make adjustments. Everybody's going to have to make a bit of an adjustment for a limited period of time. It doesn't specifically provide in here for that, but generally speaking, the administration works as a team. I mean, there are topics that come up on a daily basis that at directors' meetings might get delegated to the director to Kim Lieber, or it might be Marie Gallo, or it could be Director Kopfer, it might be myself. So there are, or the mayor, that assumes to assist in some of those endeavors. So I'm confident that for what we're doing, that we could accomplish that with the staffing that we have to ensure that the responsibilities of the individual in their original position are satisfied. I'm comfortable that that can happen. No provision in here for offloading, but I'm comfortable that we could ensure that that gets taken care of. Thank you.
Yeah, more?
No.
Go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
Michael, would this person that's nominated be at a director level?
It does not specifically state that the person has to be at a director level, but it certainly could be one of the directors. There's a question, I think, as to whether it could be Director Kopfer. In a charter capacity, Director Kopfer, it provides that it provides that it's a full-time position in the charter. You also have an issue of increase in compensation during term, which people can debate about because she's an elected official. You also have, it doesn't say in her job description, as it does with the mayor, who shall hold no other office of employment with the city. It doesn't say that about Director Kopfer, but it does not specifically direct that it needs to be a director that would fulfill that capacity.
Thank you.
All right. Council? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Director Grow, I didn't see any indication in the legislation as to whether it identified or excluded elected officials or non-bargaining employees.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
It doesn't say that in here, but I don't know that the mayor would select from the bargaining class to put them into a management position is like an inherent conflict, would probably be one that I think the mayor, I'm going to, with the guidance and assistance of his director team, I think would find somebody that would not be in that inherent conflict situation in an appointment such as that. So I'm comfortable that we would not go down that path.
I'm certain you are, but I would be more comfortable if non-bargaining employee and elected official were excluded from
That's fine.
this position.
If that's the will of council, I have no objection with that. That's fine.
Okay. Also, as it relates to the person who could potentially fill this position, I do know of one offhand that I feel would be
We meant bargaining. We know
inherently
what we meant.
capable of this position. One who has dealt with the safety issues, especially the COVID-related concerns that have happened in this past year since we've been without a safety director. That person has also implemented safety oversights to protect the employees and the residents and the visitors in the building. She has knowledge of the departments and staffing and knowledge of service due to current positions and overseeing building department. If it were the will of council to nominate this person, could we do that, or would we have to amend this legislation?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe, but with the separation of legislative and executive function, I don't know that it would be I don't think it would be within the domain of council to make a director nomination. I think being consistent with where we are with the charter provision, it would be a position that would be nominated by the mayor. And then with councils, under the current process, it's a nomination with consent and approval by the council. So it would have to originate with the executive.
So it couldn't be a direct appointment from council?
One more time, please?
Could it be a direct appointment from council?
No, it could not.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Glasper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Director Garreau, during the unfortunate dog bite process administratively, the mayor was able to designate the finance director. What about this ordinance provides additional powers, or how does this ordinance differ? Why couldn't, in theory, the mayor designate someone to fulfill these responsibilities just as he designated Director Kopfer in that situation?
I think that Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Councilman. I think that the difference is that the section dealing with the dog case specifically allowed for a designee, which is not here. That there was a designee authorization in that particular piece of legislation. I can tell you, for example, that the issues that are of concern to me are contractual. We have contractual obligations with our collective bargaining agreements that specifically call out who it is to do that. There's no designee position. It says who must act in what capacity. That's primarily what concerns me. I know this issue has come up in the past with the city of North Olmsted during the vacancy of when Mr. Rittenauer transitioned out, and Mr. Scott Thomas, it was between Scott Thomas and Chase Rittenauer, and I know that the city was found to lack authority to do what it needed to do. Because there was a vacancy. So contractually, it's required to be called out. Specific obligations are imposed upon one person. There is no designee provision. With the dog case, there was a designation, authorization to do a designee, which is why Director Kopfer said in that capacity, she didn't become the safety director. She performed some duties that were assigned to her pursuant to the designation, which was authorized by the ordinance. So there's a bit of a difference there. Hopefully I explained that, but there's a distinction between those two. I don't think the mayor could, without your authorization, could make somebody the safety director. The authorization in the original ordinance allowed for a designation, which is different.
Mr. Garreau, is there anything in this that stops the mayor from splitting these and making two people to handle
There's not.
different jobs? Okay.
There's nothing requiring him to do it. It's just if he does it, then he has the capacity to do it.
Okay.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Glassburn continues.
sorry,
with
go
question.
ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess to that point, if any of the current directors, elected or otherwise, were appointed for the position formally, would they not be eligible to accept that appointment, except for under this interim tag?
It's so difficult in this thing with the masks, I'm sorry, and the microphone's not picking up very well.
If any of the three current directors
Right.
were appointed through the normal process to fulfill this role, could they do that and retain their current director position if council confirmed it?
If council, I believe that could be the case, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Schuman. Director Groh, are we going to, like just blindly know this, and one day we're going to be told who that is? I share Councilwoman Williamson's concern with regard to elected officials and then contract our contract employees.
Mr.
So I would like
Yeah.
to specifically see that.
I wrote it down. And I'm sorry, I was saying non-bargaining, I meant bargaining.
Yeah, thank you.
I misspoke. And if I can, Mr. Chairman, thank you. If I may,
Please,
Mr.
go
Chairman,
ahead.
back to Mr. Glassburn. I think there's a timing question. Hearings and nominations have taken a considerable amount of time of late, and I'm trying to expedite a process that ensures, because we're on the clock right now on one of these issues, and I'm running out of time. And there is a timing question that I'm concerned about. So that's why it's this way versus another way, although I understand your question that it could also possibly be another way. I understand that.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I mean, if council, if it's the will of council to accept a specific individual, then I don't see why we wouldn't, understanding that there's 4 months or whatever left here, 3 months and change, I don't understand why we wouldn't just expedite that confirmation hearing. We did authorize the electronic meetings during our recess in order to be open to do this. I mean, we're willing to do something here, but this kind of like blindly discarding the confirmation process is a bit odd. So to me, the way to come to a consensus here is for us to have an understanding of both sides coming to an agreement as to who the person will be, and then we hold that confirmation hearing in an expedited fashion and just move forward.
Mr. Chairman.
That's fine.
Mr. Glassburn, it's oftentimes it's been a challenge to find consensus, and that's okay. That's what legislatures do. I understand what you're suggesting, and I think that's an optimal scenario. That would be the best case scenario, but the scenario that I'm facing doesn't necessarily allow for that as the way for us to be able to do the job that we need to do to ensure that the tasks are being handled. I understand that. If we go through 2 meetings, this council can fracture on a different issue. I know that. But I also understand that council could nominate somebody and they could fly right through. I understand that too, but there's no guarantee that's going to happen. And I'm running out of time to get this stuff done. And I understand council's response could be, well, you should have brought this to us 6 months ago. I understand that, but here we are now. And if perhaps in another time warp, we go back and we might look at this in a different way and everybody could do something differently, but that's not what I'm facing right now. I hear what you're saying, but I've selected this approach because this is the way I think it's necessary for me to be able to do what I have to do to ensure that our contractual obligations are being fulfilled and to ensure that the concerns that I have as the law director are satisfied.
Go ahead, keep going.
But I understand.
Thank you, Mr.
Go
Chair.
ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, believe it or not, Director Groh, I'm trying to assist you here because
It's okay.
I think if this is a question mark, there is a chance that this won't pass. Okay? If there's an understanding of who this person's going to be, they're nominated, we could hold the confirmation hearing before council next week and confirm them at the meeting. I mean, but
To be honest with you, I haven't discussed who the mayor would nominate, and I'm not sure how much time the mayor's put into it because he wasn't sure if he was going to go ahead and have this process in place. It's been a long, arduous process on both sides for this. It hasn't necessarily been enjoyable along the way. So I'm not sure, for instance, as I sit here, I wouldn't know who the mayor would nominate. I haven't had that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Groh, I'm sort of leaning toward needing to know who it is. Obviously, we have a limited pool, since you're suggesting it's director level. We are excluding, elected officials. I mean, I don't think it's a large discussion that you need to have with the mayor, do you, about who that person would be? And I think that we all need a comfort level because of the process that we have all been, put through. We understand your need. It's immediate. We get that. But we were not necessarily, over this entire term, the holdup. So I think that, you might do a little better to have that discussion, who is likely that person, and then perhaps let us know that. I would be happy to attend, a special meeting tomorrow. I mean, pick a day, because we know that you need this. We really do. And there's no obstinance here. It's just that things have not been presented well. And, we still had a debacle over the dog bite thing. I mean, so we need a little bit more comfort in knowing who that candidate could be or would be. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
just a question. Did you say that it was just director level?
It doesn't say that in the ordinance.
Correct,
no.
okay, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to, Ms. Heeman
No, yeah, it
said
does
director
not.
level, and it does not.
My
Director
current-
Copper, I was addressing the law director.
I'm trying to clarify so that
I
everybody
don't need
clearly
you to,
understands, and
thank
I'm
you,
asking him a question.
Mr. Chairman, if I can answer Director Kupfer's question, please, thank you.
Would you please?
Thank you. No, the current ordinance does not specifically state
Right.
director level. It doesn't include that, no.
And council's asked for or bargaining unit people to be excluded and elected people.
Correct, elected officials, correct.
Correct, okay.
Okay, how about somebody we haven't heard from in a while? Anybody? Mr. Broussard, Mr. Limper?
You don't want me to talk again?
Would you like to? I'm sorry. Would you like to say something? No, I'd just I'd be very curious to see if this is acceptable or not, if we're going to pass this. I'd like to see this, if we bring it up next week on suspension, then we'll know if it's acceptable to council or not, and then it'd be nice if it passed, and then you can move on with city business. You got 4 months to go. We got an election coming up in 2 months. I mean, we're running out of time here. If you got issues we got to take care of. I mean, it seems, and if the mayor has the option of being able to split this in two and handing stuff off to two different people here, I mean, this seems like a really good idea. I think it's kind of clever, considering the limited amount of time we have left, and I mean, we could have another person offered up and end up in another battle. So, and at least we can get through the year. Wouldn't that be nice?
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Limper?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the only question I have is, it's been 2 months since the last candidate came up, and understanding why we haven't tried to submit another candidate through the
Please.
process. Why we haven't tried to submit another candidate through the process here, just the current process instead of changing it. I understand what you're trying to do, Mr. Groh, but I'm wondering why the mayor hasn't found another candidate to propose. So maybe that's, I guess
I mean,
that's the mayor.
I won't pretend to speak for the mayor, but I can tell you that you're asking someone to take a job for 3.5 months. Now, if you can go find someone that doesn't currently have a job that wants to do that wants to do it, that wants to go through the interview process and take the job, I suppose that's optimal, right? That's what I said. That might be the best way to go. I don't see that happening right now. I don't. I will speak for him, but I mean, he obviously, it's his nomination if he chooses to make it. I don't know who else he has in mind, if he's interviewed other people, if he even is interested in interviewing people, if he's looking at it like, and saying it's the end of the year and we'll just see what happens. I don't know. This was my ordinance, so.
Thank you.
You also, if somebody were to offer me the job, I wouldn't take it, I wouldn't touch it, I wouldn't want to have to get grilled by this council. I wouldn't have to want to go through it, I don't know anybody that would. And then you're looking for somebody that's actually qualified on top of it, and to do it for 4 months, maybe that's all. So I think that's a bit much to ask of anybody qualified. I can't imagine who that would be, name that would come up, so. Just my opinion. Anybody else got anything to say? Go ahead, Mr. Glassberg.
Mr. Chair, I guess I'll be the more blunt person out here. I heard one council person say they would like to see one of the directors do it. I heard another council person say that I think I heard that they're okay with the director doing it. Sure sounds to me like there's at least 2 yes votes right there, and I think I'd be okay with the director doing it. So I think whoever, nominated a director, and I think we got a confirmation, Mr. Chair. It only takes 3 yes
Has it occurred to you
votes.
that director might not want to do it?
Did it occur that they might?
I'm just saying.
Let me ask a question, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, then what if I put in there that he has to select from the current director complement? You don't have to come back for an interview. You've interviewed the directors, you know who they are, you've approved them in the past. If I took this thing and just said he's got to choose from one of the current sitting directors to fill that position, and that's that. All right, we all know who the directors are, everybody's, this council approved them at one point, then I would narrow it down to that and ask for your consideration on that so that we can remove the concern that there's somebody, look, I don't know who else you'd pick, frankly. I suppose if you wanted to pick a foreman from the Public Service Department and put him up in the director on a temporary basis, well, God bless him, maybe you could do that. I'm not sure that's what he's planning on doing, but I would be amenable to my legislation simply saying, choose from the current directors, assign those duties to them under this provision, and then we can move on. I don't think you'd have to do an interview, we know who they are. Right?
Ms. Heeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Accepting elected officials.
I couldn't hear you.
Accepting elected officials. I think they're,
If nominated, she will not accept. If elected, she would not serve. I'm not sure she'd do it anyways. Although, by all means, you're very willing to do these tasks.
All
I
right,
wouldn't even be able to get paid for it.
okay.
Is that something, if I was to do that, and the council would amend that, include that language in there, it would just be from the current director complement of non-elected directors?
Let me put this before the committee then. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we recommend 2021-50 as amended, that it would be one of the existing non-elected directors, and ask for suspension, and ask for a second.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 3-0. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you, council. I appreciate the very good discussion, and I appreciate your working with me on this. Thank you very much. It's very important to me, and I thank you.
It's very important, this is-
Okay. I'd like
Yeah,
to-
I'm sorry, that concludes my meeting at, what time do I have here? 7:43.
Okay, I'd like to start the Streets and Transportation Committee meeting on August 24th at 7:43 PM. Present are committee members Limpert, Glassburn, and Kelly, the rest of council, the mayor, finance director, law director, planning director, and guests. On the agenda is ordinance 2021-53, Clegg Park Crosswalk Ordinance, which is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Planning and Community Development to request proposals from qualified engineer firms for engineering services for the installation of a pedestrian hybrid beacon for the Clegg Park Crosswalk Signalization Project, and further authorizing the mayor, subject to approval of the Board of Control, to enter into an agreement with the engineer selected in the RFP process and declaring an emergency. I will pass this to Mr. Glassburn to explain the proposed ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You asked, I believe, at our last meeting to the effect of whether this was a replacement or a supplement of sorts. I see this as a supplement of taking an aspect that I think we can all agree to. I think that the community wants, they said they wanted, and at least starting the ball rolling. We've all seen in the news that the federal government's doing its best to put together trillions of dollars. Let's have some projects ready so that if we decide that we like the funding source, we can move forward. It's that simple, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to ask, so was this considered as just, let me ask the plan director this first. Is it possible, so we currently had another resolution that's in committee to implement a crosswalk proposal that's very similar to this. Like you said, it's a piece of this, as well as the road, a turning lane onto Maple Ridge from Clegg Road. Is it possible, and what would the timing look like of going through with a revised application, safety application, just for the crosswalk component of this, and excluding the turning lane? What would that timeline look like versus just going forward on our own with a proposal to implement the crosswalk component here as Mr. Glassburn's proposing?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Glassburn was talking about the design and pursuing construction at a later time. That's my understanding. The safety application through ODOT would be to solicit construction funds. I believe that they're accepting applications for the short form, the under $500,000 project. I believe that we could submit at any time on a rolling basis. I know they did not have a spring funding round. I've not been in touch with them since probably May, was probably the last time I reached out. But the information given to us at the time was that in the fall, they would consider the small applications for funding. And so it's possible, if council wanted to submit for that portion of the project, that we potentially could, though I think that the ordinance is about the design and the ODOT funding is about the construction.
Mr. Glassburn, is that something that would align with what you're proposing here, or is it different?
I think so, Mr. Chair. As I said, back during the last Great Recession, we had that term shovel-ready. I think we want to get something like this to be shovel-ready. So that's again, I don't mean to complicate this.
Yeah. No, thank you, thank you. And then, Ms. Lieber, so if something like that were to be proposed, that would leave a portion of that proposed project, kind of the larger portion of the turning lane, still an open item. Now, would that funding fall in the over 500,000 with the proposed Clegg Road updates, agnostic of the, removing the crosswalk? Would that still be something that would fit into the larger buckets of projects?
So the original proposal was about 480,000, so slicing out the turn lane and focusing on the pedestrian hybrid beacon only would reduce it quite a bit, so it would make it a small request. We could submit just that request to ODOT, I think. I know the study contemplates more improvements than that one improvement. I don't know that they wouldn't consider just funding a smaller portion of it. I'm sure it would be nonetheless competitive against any other applications that are submitted in the region. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, I was just asking, so were you talking about the turning lane or the crosswalk?
The pedestrian hybrid beacon.
Okay, so what I was referring to is removing the pedestrian hybrid beacon from the original proposal that was in the previous legislation.
The legislation.
Would that still, with that decoupled, would that still qualify as a large project?
It was always a small project,
Okay.
under 500,000.
Yeah.
So it'll go to a very tiny project.
And then having two separate, obviously it's competitive, the other one would be probably not applied for. It would be in a future fiscal year if that was, if we didn't find an alternative way to approach Clay Road.
At that point, we're probably at a place where our safety study would not be valid at that point because it wouldn't be based upon the most current traffic counts or data. If we were to wait much longer, I think we're in a window now where our safety study is still based upon recent enough data that it would count towards any current application. If we were to wait another year or two, I don't know if that would be the situation still. So,
Thank you. That was nice. Any other questions just in general about the two different projects? Then I think we can go into detail too about the proposed hybrid beacon. You want to talk about the hybrid beacon, right, Mr. Keller?
I just want to talk about that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so let's talk about that part of it then. So any questions on the hybrid beacon as it stands and the current proposal of going to bid? Mr. Mayor?
Yeah,
go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman. You're talking about shovel-ready, but correct me if I'm wrong, but we had 95% between our partners at ODOT, NOACA, the county, we had 95% of that paid for, right? I believe. It's been a while. This has been held in committee for a year, but 95, and again, this was doing the road, doing the northbound turning lane at Maple Ridge, and the hybrid beacon. 95% of that would have been paid. Does that include the engineering of it paid?
no.
Okay.
If awarded, that ODOT would have covered 90% and the county would have covered half of the
5%.
remaining share.
Engineering too, or no? We were on the hook for engineering?
I believe we were on the hook for engineering.
Okay. So this is not only shovel-ready, it's paid for. And I guess my other question is, the reason this is held in committee was because you're talking about a 3-lane highway that the study said was unsafe. It would be more unsafe than it is now. That's why you wouldn't get safety funding. Are you going to design this for a 3-lane road, or are you designing it as the road is now?
So, Mr. Mayor, this piece of legislation specifically that's proposed here in front of us is around a turning beacon, or a crosswalk beacon, which is part of that legislation.
It's my understanding that that's a little more complicated. It's not just a sign that goes up. It's a lot of underground stuff.
It's not, and that's why there's a proposal here for engineering, et cetera, right? So I think what I'm trying to understand is the timing of going out to bid as this legislation's proposing, doing the engineering assessment and actually building this, and what that timeline looks like versus what's held in committee, which is, a piece of this proposal, which would be an application for a safety grant that is funded, as you're saying, and that piece of legislation included a turning lane and Clay Road work, right?
Right, which is how you get a project like this done. You don't just willy-nilly throw up a hybrid beacon. This is something that you got to do during road construction, or otherwise.
Well, I think so, and that's why that's why I'm asking Ms. Lieber what the timeline looks like for doing something like this. And then, as Mr. Glassburn, when I asked her that, would sound amenable if we can alter the safety grant application for the turning beacon, then that would apply to that specific piece. And now I go back to Ms. Lieber here. Obviously there's discussion, which would be the next part of the conversation, which is when would we put this up? And would we put this up on the current Clegg Road, or would we align this with other work on Clegg Road, agnostic of the other parts of that safety grant? We're still would want to redo Clegg Road at some point, repaving, et cetera. So I'm just trying to understand the timings of this. Mr. Glassburn, were you proposing we just put this up on the current street?
So, Mr. Chair, there's 3 different components we're conflating, right?
Right.
There's the repaving of Clegg Road.
Right,
There's the turning lane.
yep,
There's the beacon.
right.
The repaving's going forward, right, with our existing road. If we do nothing, repaving is going forward.
And just hold on. Ms. Lieber, that's correct, right? 2024 would be?
Yeah, fiscal 2024,
Okay.
so that begins in July of 2023.
July in 2023. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Glassburn.
Right. So obviously it would make some sense to coordinate this beacon with that repaving, should there be any conflict. Makes perfect sense. Is there a larger decision about whether we want to have the turning lane, 3-lane road? Yes, there seems to be existing disagreement on that topic. I was looking for a way to take the non-controversial component and move it forward with the repaving. So if the answer is we can't move forward with this component with the other issue outstanding, so be it. But this was to open that possibility, Mr. Chair.
So, Mr. Mayor, kind of circling back to your question and what the line of thinking is, so if the left turn lane part of the safety application is not tenable to the committee or council as a whole, the beacon is, my question is, I wouldn't want to pay for the, I understand the shovel-ready and there could be money, but, you know, there is a safety grant application process, which, you know, this has been thoroughly studied and proposed. Can we move forward with that as part of the safety grant, removing the turning lane, which, you know, some people think is valuable, 48, given the 48 crashes that have happened there, and apparently others on council aren't. So trying to understand, is that even a proposal that we amend the application to take out, as Mr. Glassburn's saying, part of the proposal that some do not want to move forward with, and just apply with the part that it seems like the will of council is to move forward with.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can,
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess so what you're proposing is just to repave the road and to do the hybrid beacon and not do the turning lane at Maple Ridge.
That is what it sounds like from going forward with this proposal, right? That's essentially what you would be committing to.
If your commitment is to safety of our residents, that the turning lane is perhaps the more important aspect of safety. I mean, if you read the study and listen to the experts, that's what's important. I get the fact that you want a 3-lane road, that's your preference. But it wasn't our partner's preference, you know? They're not willing to step up to the plate and pay for that because it's not going to be safer. And part of what we're getting is safety money. It's just in front of you, in committee for the last year, is an unbelievably great proposal.
So-
And I guess I don't understand why we're doing this.
Yeah.
It makes no business sense to me.
Yeah, thank you.
But then again, a lot of it doesn't, you know?
So back to committee here, so is this,
Mr. Chair? Oh, I have a question. I didn't know if you saw me.
we're still working in committee, Ms. Heeman, and then we'll move forward.
Thank you.
So I want to make sure that I'm getting the proposal right based on this legislation, whether this would make more sense than just having an application and engineering proposal, since that's already been aligned with the safety grant component. So I'm just looking for a committee if that makes sense to go down a path like that, or do you still want to keep this separate as a standalone proposal for engineering funding and you know, as a separate self-funded project?
Chair, I did not quite follow what you were asking, so if you could.
Yeah, I'll say
restate
that again.
I'd appreciate
So
it.
the ordinance as it's written
Yes,
is to go as a self-standalone project by the city
yes,
to do planning, engineering of a crosswalk for Clegg Road, right? Or a beacon, hybrid beacon. I keep calling it crosswalk, but the hybrid beacon at the crosswalk of the Clegg Park. What I'm trying to understand, and that's where I'm kind of looking to Ms. Lieber as well, this part of is, as you said, decoupled from what was already a piece of legislation proposed for safety application, right? And so what I'm saying is I think what we have here is something that it should be amended to be the application for safety grant as opposed to a self-funded project.
Mr. Chair, if you wish to, or if it's the will of council to apply for safety grant funding as the source of this, that's not something I would object to. If I understood the director correctly, though, safety grant funding is for construction, it's not for the engineering. Did I understand that correctly, Director?
I believe that to be true, at least in other cases. For like Clegg Road, for example, the city is going to be sharing engineering with the county, but typically in projects, the city will cover engineering. But I'm not 100% sure, and I will follow up with that question.
So what you're saying is then based on decoupling this from the Clegg Road portion and the turning lane, then we would encumber engineering costs that in the original proposal, there was going to be some coverage by.
The city was, the county was going to pay 60% of the engineering cost for the entire project, so the city was going to be on the hook for 40%. That would have been inclusive of whatever safety portion, hybrid beacon, turn lane. So, you know, if, like, our intent was to design this whole project together, not separately design a hybrid beacon or a turn lane or a road resurfacing. There's economy of scale, and also with the county, I believe, would be leading the engineering and the construction management, and potentially the design side. You know, you'd want to have like one consultant that does the surveying, the engineering, and coordinates all of the utilities and the underground and the wiring diagrams. So there is a benefit of bundling that engineering as one if your intent is to package it together. So there's an economy of scale that could save the city dollars and our partners dollars as well. So it's possible we could make application to ODOT without proceeding with design engineering until we know if there's funding available for our project. That might be one way to go.
All right, so before I get back to committee with their recommendation, Ms. Heeman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Lieber, what would you expect the city's 40% of engineering would have estimated to be?
I do not know on the resurfacing project. I do not have
Yeah,
that.
if you don't know, yeah, okay.
I'm sorry. It would be
No, it's okay. If you don't know,
wild
you
guess
don't
at this
know.
point.
It's quite all right. Thank you.
You know, maybe I can throw out a number. I think I saw the number of
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
of the hybrid beacon being $70,000. Typically, engineering would be 10%, is that correct?
Typically, but this, we're talking about
Yeah.
the road resurfacing as a whole, and that was going to be a much bigger project. I would think engineering for the hybrid beacon, if we were to slice it out, would be more in the $10,000 range.
That's what I would guess.
Stay here.
So would we still be able to go for grant for the crosswalk beacon and the resurfacing without the turning lane?
The resurfacing is done. It's a done deal. It's
Yeah.
happening regardless.
So that wouldn't be part of the engineering?
So we're going to begin engineering next year for the road resurfacing. If we apply for any type of safety project and receive it, then we'll roll that engineering in with the road resurfacing engineering into one effort, rather than a little engineering for pedestrian hybrid beacon and bigger engineering for the road resurfacing. So I think if council is interested in applying for funding, it only makes sense to wait and see if we're successful finding funding so that the engineering can happen at one time rather than in two separate efforts
Yep.
that we'll have to coordinate between potentially different consultants.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to bring this all back together. I know this is, some people are trying to understand the method of my madness, right? But there's a piece of legislation here to go for engineering versus a application for safety grant that we had talked about, which had a similar component. And what I'm trying to understand is the timing, the cost, and how do we package these? Because I've had this sitting in committee for 10 months, and from the discourse of the committee, the turning lane was, and evidenced by this legislation, the turning lane was not a favorable requirement unless it contained a much broader road expansion. So what I'm looking for the committee to give me feedback on is if we strip out the turning lane as part of that safety grant application, does it make sense to amend that legislation and move forward to try to apply for a safety grant with those components, the resurfacing and the beacon? Because as we've discussed, it doesn't make sense to, cost-wise, to put the beacon up only to then have to redo the road shortly after, based on the timelines here, fiscal year 2024, starting July 2023. So that's kind of where I'm looking for feedback from the committee, so we can, sort of make a recommendation to either just vote on this piece of legislation or make an amendment to this piece of legislation, or, the other one held in committee to accomplish what we're looking to do.
You know,
So, Mr. Chair, the resurfacing is independent of this
right.
and is independent of the safety grant other legislation.
But it's going to be bundled together from a timing perspective.
Sure. So, does that mean that your fundamental question is would this signal be bundled with the resurfacing or not? Is that the core question?
Yes. And then should we amend and actually go for a safety grant instead of doing our own engineering? Because that's kind of the two decisions here, right?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Rand.
You say resurfacing is independent of these other projects, but if we just resurface it, wouldn't it be probably an 80-20 project, Ms. Lieber? Would that be correct?
It is.
And part of the reason we're getting the 90 and then 95 from the county is because of these safety features, right? Am I correct in saying that? Because typically we would get typically things would be an 80-20 split.
It is an 80-20 split, so federal will pay 80, and then 20 is local, except in this case, the county is our partner, so the county is sharing our half. So it's like 80-10-10, 80 federal, 10 county, 10 city,
No matter what, even if,
for the resurfacing part.
no
But then,
matter what, even if we,
yes,
Okay.
and up to a certain, there's a funding cap that NOACA puts in
Yeah,
place.
okay.
So if we add things as a city, base repair, other things that aren't federally
Sure.
eligible, then it's on us. So we often do that to improve drainage or other such things. Safety is a little different. It's not 80-20, it's 90-10, or at least it has been 90-10. And so in that case, 90 is state, and then again, the county being our partner agreed to split the remainder, so that's why then it becomes 95-5. So the combination of math would get added together in terms of what, you know, if it's the whole safety project, a part of the safety project, but, you know, it would divide along those lines. Resurfacing related would fall under the 80-20, safety improvements would fall under the 95-5.
Right. So I guess that goes back to the fundamental question. You want to pay for engineering, or do we want to go for the safety grant first to find out if we can get funding for that?
I cannot hear him.
For just the hybrid beacon?
I can't hear him.
Sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Keller.
I have an issue with this hybrid beacon. So the
Yeah.
hybrid beacon is flashing yellow signal, correct, for the crossing?
It starts yellow and flashing and then goes to a solid red. So it does behave more closely to a regular signal that people are familiar with as opposed to the flashing, which I think a lot of people feel like, could I still proceed with caution? Do I have to stop? So it does go through a sequence of yellow flashing, red flashing, or red, and then it clears. So its typical state is no flashing at all until a button is pushed.
So it'll go to a solid red?
It goes to a solid red.
Well, somebody, and so here's the problem I have with that section of Clegg Road. So there's so many side streets right there. Just last week, I'm trying to turn onto my street because it's only 2 lanes. I'm stopped, and a vehicle just blows past me going southbound through the tree lawns of the houses to get around me. So if it's just a flashing yellow light like it is now, there's no way that vehicle would have stopped, or many others that I see through there. It needs a red light, right? It needs a stop signal.
And to your point, Mr. Chair, that's why we recommended the pedestrian hybrid beacon is something that drivers are familiar with stopping at the solid red, and we felt that was appropriate for this location since there's a history of driver inattention to the flashing.
And I don't even think it's driver inattention. I think they just don't care. When you come up, you see people, you come up to a traffic light on the road and it turns yellow, it doesn't mean caution, it means step on it and try to get through before it turns red. So in order to cross that section of road, it's just dangerous right there. So yeah, we would need a red light, right? Okay.
Right, yes.
All right,
we
that's my
agree.
point.
Yeah, and that's what the hybrid beacon
Okay.
would do.
I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah, that's what the hybrid beacon is it's a yellow-red hybrid.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Schuman.
Okay, so I'm a little confused here. So we have a piece of legislation that's in committee, held in committee right now, that would be under $500,000. The window we had, it would have been 95% paid for, and that includes the resurfacing, the other work that would be done on Clegg Road, some drainage issues, and it includes a turn lane, the one turn lane on Maple Ridge, and then a hybrid beacon, correct? So what happened to that? Is that dead? We're not going to talk about that anymore? We're just going to hold it in committee until it dies? I mean, the reason I'm asking is, I understand that some members of the committee and some members of council would like to see 3 lanes and, a bigger project. One of the arguments against the turn lane and engaging in this project that was planned out and recommended to us by everybody, I guess, right? All the partners, is that if we did it, then we wouldn't be able to put in 3 lanes soon. We'd be looking at 10 years down the road or whatever. If we go for the safety grant and ask for this flashing light, this hybrid beacon, whatever, right? Is that going to have the same effect as putting in the turn lane would have, where we wouldn't be able to go get more money later? Would that be, are we being silly here? Did we miss a bet and now we're trying to make up for it and we're just going to do one thing and then we'll never get 3 lanes? I'm really confused here.
Mr. Chair, what I don't know is how ODOT will view an application for just the pedestrian beacon when other communities also have safety studies and needs. I don't know if it will be more favorable because it's a really small ask or less favorable because we had a study that recommended more and we're not proposing to do more. I can't answer that question. We could always, as long as a safety program exists, we could always apply for future improvements down the road, but it's unlikely once a road is resurfaced that we're going to be doing that for, 15, 20 years. And also, again, I'd mentioned like our safety study is current, but if the data becomes stale, we would have to repeat a safety study at additional cost to the city to update the data if we wanted to proceed with an application for something like that in the near future, for like a turn lane or something like that.
This light you're talking about, this goes over the top of the road?
Correct.
So are you guys going to have this designed so that it could potentially be there if there were 3 lanes, which I think would be a totally different thing than putting it up over a 2-lane road, right? Am I wrong there?
I think we definitely want to know if what we're doing in that case, because it would impact the location of where the foundations and the mast arms would go. The thought, at least for this study, was that we'd be reusing the locations of the existing signal supports. If the road were to get wider in the future, that would definitely cause those things to move. I don't know that we'd need to acquire property, but surveying will tell us eventually, like, if we have enough width to move without land acquisition.
So if members of the committee got their wish list, which would be to widen the road, we could be putting this thing up and then having to put a whole nother one up in the future. If we didn't do it that way.
I guess there's a possibility. I think, when we looked at the road, we thought there was enough width to accommodate all the things that we need in the right-of-way, but I don't think we studied in great detail, like to the surveying extent of if a 3rd lane could be accommodated, plus, all of the utilities and signal supports. We didn't go to that level of detail, and we normally wouldn't until we get, funding in place and we get a surveyor on board.
Has anything changed in the possibility of getting funding to put 3 lanes in?
Not, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Ms. Lever, if we did apply for the safety grant and the rolling time period, what what's the expected turnaround time? And then when would we, if we were rejected, be able to reapply for a similar or different project?
You know, with the recent changes to safety funding, I don't feel confident without asking ODOT those questions, but typically there's fall and spring funding, and you would find out within a couple months of application. It wasn't like a year later. It was you'd apply in September, you would, find out within a couple months. So I would think by the end of the year, we would know if we applied this year.
Mr.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Just a question for Councilman Glassbird. It seems like you're kind of conceding that the county is going to do this road regardless, right? It's on the schedule. They're going to do a 2-lane road.
The repaving is going, we've already signed up for the repaving project.
Right. So you're conceding they're repaving a 2-lane road. No one's ripping up a 2-lane road to make it a 3-lane road and funding it. Why wouldn't we just go ahead and do those 2 safety items that the study recommended, and have it 95% paid for? I mean, and then work on your 3-lane highway next time. I mean, if it's going to be paved, you might as well do what the experts recommend.
Mr. Chair, if we move forward and have the opportunity to do 3 lanes, repaving the road is not going to make that less likely or harm the ability to do that, especially if we can get that lined up prior to that project occurring. If we get beacons and we get the hardware for this, might we have to move the bases if we get to 3 lanes? Yeah, sure. That could be in the cards. Is that going to be the entire cost of this project? No. Mr. Chair, you were looking for ways to move forward on aspects of this. So I'm offering a solution that I think that could get through council to move forward on some of this. We may move through the next 6 months to a year, see the federal government spend trillions and trillions of dollars, and it just doesn't make sense. We're not going to get a source of funding that matches our needs to pursue a 3-lane project. If that's the case, we can make a decision, right? But right now, I don't think we need to delay proceeding with this specific improvement to wait for any of those other outcomes. And again, I thought this was a constructive, step forward. If it's not, then I guess it's not, or we can all vote on it and see. But that's what I'm attempting to do here, Mr. Chair. It's really not that complicated.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Schuman.
I'd really like to vote on the original legislation. We've never had a chance to do that.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Ms. Eman.
Thank you. That would have to be put on an agenda,
Right.
Mr. Schuman, so it's not on our agenda today. What is on the agenda today is this. So, everybody wants to keep trying to go backwards to something that is not on our agenda and didn't seem to be what, council really wanted. I'm inclined to think that we are headed toward a lot more infrastructure money coming our way, and, just seems to be the way that the entire, funding is going. So
Mr. Chairman?
I don't know that, again, as Councilman Glassburn pointed out, that until you see how that plays out, you don't really know. And so I believe that there are some folks that jump at a short opportunity and some people that have a little, perhaps bigger vision. And if you're fighting a timeline, well, sometimes you wait. There's no harm in actually waiting for some things. But what is in front of us tonight is this, simple project of, would we like to move forward a piece of, a safety issue? That's all. Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, just to comment on that, a lot of times what you call moving backwards, I would call, and I think a lot of people here would call moving forward. But To your point, Mr. Glassman, if I could ask you the question, your idea behind this legislation, let's just talk about this legislation, is just to engineer it and have it shovel-ready. Would you be in favor then of having the residents pay for it? I mean, tax dollars pay for it, or are you just looking to say, hey, I want the city to pay full boat engineering and just have it ready in case federal money comes our way? Because that's what it sounded like, and I don't know the answer.
Mr. Chair, my understanding was that we had a considerable amount of engineering ahead of us. That was the city portion anyway, as Director Leewer talked about. Again, this is a very small portion of a larger project or a significant minority portion of the mayor's project. Again, I'm trying to be constructive to what you asked for, Mr. Chair, so.
Mr. Chair, if I could suggest.
We can call the question, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if I could suggest what being constructive might be is to let your council vote on the original proposal, which includes these safety items in it, which includes 95% funding. And if you concede it's going to be repaved anyway, why wouldn't you go that route? That's what constructive is. So I would recommend to the chairperson, who, by the way, Mr. Limpert's done a great job in trying to get this thing out of committee and get a vote from council.
So I think, are there any other comments from council that haven't spoken yet on this? So my proposal is to hold this in committee with kind of a decision of, do we go for an amendment and get safety funding, or do we just go forward with the engineering on this? And I'm not completely clear, Ms. Lever, I think we just need to get a little bit more numbers around that, of what the difference is between going through that, numbers and time of those two things, and then I think we can circle back up and probably, move forward with a direction.
Mr.
quickly.
Chair, that'll give me a little time to track down some information that council asked where I wasn't entirely sure of my answer.
Yep.
And the cost of engineering. But I guess, as I sit here and listen to the conversation and think a bit more, we would be beginning engineering for Clegg Road, whatever scope is selected, next year. And it certainly, from a project manager standpoint, is always beneficial to work with one consultant, one design effort. So to the extent we could think about, designing one time rather than pieces of the project at different times, I just think from the city point, we're likely to end up with a project that we like better and that runs more smoothly. So, thank you.
Okay. So, and any other comments do you guys have for the committee have? Okay, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to hold this in committee and ask for a second.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0, and I'll conclude the Streets and Transportation Committee meeting at 8:24 PM.
Is that it? Okay, you want to keep this around? Looks like you're done.